what precautions that these officers took. It wouldn't matter what their training was. It wouldn't matter that they had tasers on their duty belts. It wouldn't matter that they had their duty sidearms and they were armed with them. It wouldn't matter that Officer Kokab was backing up Officer David Curtis in this traffic stop. And it wouldn't even matter that Officer Jeff Kokab was wearing his body armor, a bulletproof vest. None of these precautions, none of them would protect them. None of them would matter against this cold-blooded, determined killer. And what started as a simple traffic stop ended with these two law enforcement officers, David Curtis and Jeffrey Kokab, City of Tampa police officers, laying on the side of 50th Street, on the side of the road, with devastating gunshot wounds to their heads. You will see evidence that first of all, this killer fled the scene. He fled this carnage that he left on 50th Street. These two officers laying there bleeding to death. And when he fled, the evidence will show, he thought that he had destroyed the two witnesses to this crime. And in fact, you're not going to hear from David Curtis and Jeff Kokab because they're gone. They're not going to come in here and testify. But there was another eye that was watching what was occurring out there that night. Not only watching, but recording what was going on. There was a video system mounted in Officer Curtis's patrol car. An L3 video system, dash cam video system. And it had been recording since before the stop of the car, which was a Toyota Camry. It had recorded the stop of the car, which was stopped because there was no automobile tag on the car. It recorded the interactions between David Curtis, Officer Curtis, and the driver, the interactions between Officer Curtis and the front seat passenger, and it recorded the murders of these two police officers. You're going to see that video. You'll see that during this trial. You're going to see these two police officers lose their lives. But what you're going to hear in that video is almost as significant, if not more so, than what you're going to see. Because what you're going to hear is that Officer David Curtis conducted a very thorough investigation from the start of this case, from the very beginning. That he asked questions not just of the driver when he came into contact with her, but he looked through the car and questioned the front seat passenger who minutes later would murder him. And you're going to see these questions. You'll see the technique that Officer Curtis used. Very rapid questions without hesitation. And what you're going to see is that the passenger responded in the same fashion, rapidly, without hesitation. Ms. Blevins, can you assist me, please?
Remember the jury, if you need to move in any way, please feel free to stand if you need to. Mr. Harmon, is this audio or just video?
Both, Your Honor.
She'll need to be able to see it. Reporter.
Yes, sir.
having some technical difficulties with the video, but what you're going to hear is the following exchange between Officer Curtis and the front seat passenger. Okay, you got anything on you, man? You'll hear the driver tell the officer, no, he's good. Officer Curtis, my man, you got any ID? You'll hear the front seat passenger, no, I ain't got no ID. What? No, he ain't got no ID, responds the driver. Then Officer Curtis, what's your last name? The front seat passenger, Morris. What's your last name, man? My name is Morris. What? Morris. You got to speak up, man. What? My name, Morris. This is all coming from the front seat passenger. What's your last name? Morris. Officer Curtis, spell it. M-O-R-R-I-S. What's your first name? Dontae, D-O-N-T-A-E. What's your middle? R. What's your date of birth? 8/24/85. Officer Curtis then rapidly asks him, how old are you? 24 years old. No hesitation, no delay. The front seat passenger knew his name, knew how to spell it, you'll find from the evidence, knew his date of birth, and within seconds gave his perfect and accurate age. What you will hear from that evidence that David Curtis so wisely collected, or you will see from that evidence that evidence allowed the investigating detectives to know almost immediately who they were looking for in this case. And that same evidence will tell you that that vicious, cold-blooded killer is sitting in this courtroom today. He's sitting right over here.
Your Honor,
Dontae R. Morris.
object at this point to the derogatory
Legal objection.
to the derogatory terminology and characterization, Your Honor.
Sustained. Rephrase, counsel.
You will see from the evidence that these murders were cold-blooded, that they were derived from a vicious intent, and you will see that the person who did this vicious, cold-blooded murderer is sitting right over here.
Objection, Your Honor.
Dontae R. Morris.
Rule. Proceed.
You will see the state put into evidence this defendant's birth certificate. That is his correct name. Dontae, D-O-N-T-A-E, Rashawn, middle initial R, Morris. Date of birth, August 24, 1985. That front seat passenger accurately identified himself. You will see in the video that Officer Curtis, after talking to Mr. Morris in the front seat and talking to the driver, a young lady named Courtney Brantley, that he then walks back to his patrol car. You will see in the video that while he's talking to Mr. Morris, that Officer Curtis appears to be writing on something that he puts back into his shirt pocket. Oh, I'm sorry, that he took out of his shirt pocket. When Officer Curtis goes back to his patrol car, he then, on an in-car computer system, runs the name, Dontae R. Morris, with a birth date of August 24th, 1985. And he comes up with Mr. Morris having a warrant. You will see in the video that Officer Curtis then exits his car. He walks around behind his car and comes up the passenger side, going to the passenger side of this Toyota Camry to confront this defendant and arrest this defendant. You will see about that time, Officer Jeffrey Kokap pulls up in his patrol car, pulls up behind Officer Curtis, gets out of his patrol car, walks up quickly behind Officer Curtis to render a backup to him during this arrest process. You will see in the video that they are both standing just outside of the passenger door, and you will hear this exchange between David Curtis, you'll see it and hear it, and the defendant. Officer Curtis, step out here. What's the deal with your warrant? Anything? You know anything about it? Mr. Morris replies, warrant? Officer Curtis, yeah. Mr. Morris states, I ain't got no warrant. Officer Curtis says, okay, step out here, turn around, put your hands behind your back. The defendant then steps out of the Toyota Camry and turns his back to Officer Curtis. Officer Curtis is standing facing the defendant with Jeff Kokap to his left. The defendant, you will see, turn his back. His arm goes behind his back as if he's surrendering, as if he's giving up. And you'll see these officers, when he does that, move close to him. And it's at that moment, in almost a blink of an eye, a split second, that this defendant pulls a firearm, apparently almost out of nowhere, it appears in the video, comes up over his shoulder and shoots so quickly, shoots both of these officers in the head. He shoots them so quickly and so efficiently that you'll see in that video, it almost sounds like one shot going off. That's how rapid the firing is, how rapid this murder is and this shooting. This murder, or these murders, were so efficiently carried out and so well planned that these two state-certified law enforcement officers, David Curtis and Jeffrey Kokak, officers trained in defensive tactics, officers trained in the use of their sidearms, their duty sidearms, and the use of their tasers. These officers were unable, because of the speed, because of the element of surprise used by this defendant, unable to evade, unable to duck, unable to produce their own firearms or tasers, unable to use any type of defensive tactic. In short, this defendant, the evidence will show, ambushed them. They were unable to do anything to defend themselves. And that's because, the evidence will show, that's the way that this defendant, Mr. Morris, sitting right over here, that's the way he planned it. That's the way he premeditated it. That's the way that he decided to commit these murders, to catch these officers off guard, to use the element of surprise, to feign his surrender so that they would draw close to him and give him easy, quick, and efficient targets up close to his body. And this evidence will show his motive. His motive will be so obvious and apparent from this evidence, from what you see in this video, because before these two officers' bodies even touch the ground, before they hit the ground, and make no mistake about it, these are devastating gunshot wounds. And when they suffer these wounds, they drop. And their bodies have not even hit the ground. And this defendant is tripping and stumbling over their bodies, trying to get away, trying to run away, trying to escape from this arrest. The evidence will clearly show that's what this defendant's motive was when he shot and murdered these two police officers, when he made the decision to take the lives of these two human beings so that he could get away, so that he could escape. You will see in the video that some women who lived nearby came upon the bodies, came upon David Curtis and Jeffrey Kokak as they laid there. Several minutes later, they found them laying there. They called 911. They reported officers down. They're dying. They're bleeding. Send someone, and within minutes, their squad mates show up. Other TPD officers racing there to the scene. These officers get out of their cars. They find David Curtis laying on his back in the grass and dirt. They find Officer Jeff Kokak laying on his back with his upper back and his head laying on top of David Curtis's chest. They separate their bodies and they start to perform CPR compressions, trying to save them, trying in vain to save them. You will hear from a medical doctor who conducted the autopsies on these two officers' bodies, a forensic pathologist, an associate medical examiner. He will tell you that these gunshot wounds were not survivable. That as soon as the bullets entered their heads, these two officers' fates were sealed. They were going to die. There's no way to survive these devastating gunshot wounds. These officers continue with life-saving efforts, and at some point, within minutes of getting there, they go to Dave Curtis's car because they're thinking maybe he pulled up the person who did this on his computer. Maybe his L3 video system will show us something, give us some clue to what happened. What they find, first of all, they find this in the front seat of Dave Curtis's car, Officer Curtis's car. That's the little notebook you will find that Dave Curtis wrote on. This is the driver, Courtney Brantley's driver's license. These are registration and insurance documents for the car. This is a close-up. That was state's A18. This is state's A19. This is a close-up of the little notebook that Officer Curtis wrote the defendant's name on. Morris Dontae R. 82485, black male, DM. Right from the beginning, these detectives and officers knew who they were looking for. They looked at the driver's license. Courtney Brantley, 907 North Parsons Avenue, Sefner, Florida. That's the driver of the car. You can't see that very well, but that's the computer screen on Dave Curtis's in-car mounted computer. Detective Houston of the Tampa Police Department will tell you he took this photograph. That is a photograph of Dontae Morris. Mr. Morris's identifying information is in this screen. Officer Curtis not only pulled up his information, but he saw a photograph of Mr. Morris. And when he approached that car to place Mr. Morris under arrest, he didn't hesitate. You're not going to find from the evidence that he ever asked that person, "What's your real name?" He went up and told him, "You have a warrant. What do you know about it? You're under arrest. Get out of the car." From that point forward, law enforcement units saturate this area. Not just Tampa Police Department units, Hillsborough County Sheriff's Office, Florida Highway Patrol, Florida Department of Law Enforcement, multiple federal agencies get involved, and they saturate the area around 50th Street and 23rd Avenue and south. A canine officer comes on the scene, several of them. The one you'll hear from tracks from the scene, and you'll hear testimony that the defendant is seen running northbound, away from the scene, away from this corner, this intersection of 23rd Avenue and 50th Street where the shootings occurred. The state's V. This is an aerial satellite photograph that shows this is 50th Street. It's a 4-lane divided highway. This is the incident scene. This is 23rd Avenue. This is 50th Street. This is where the officers' bodies are found. Witnesses see the shooter run north on the sidewalk and into this parking lot, into this apartment complex, and go over a fence. And officers actually canines track to that fence where they find scuff marks in the sand, and they find a black zipper on the top of that chain link fence, which is about 6 or 7 feet high, and has wire on the top where a zipper was ripped off of Mr. Morris's clothing as he jumped over it, evading and running. So he's heading, the evidence will show, westbound. They set up a perimeter that goes out from this crime scene several blocks. Mr. Morris is able to evade and get outside of that perimeter. Now, you're going to see in the video, you'll see him running away from the scene, but you're also going to see the driver, what she does. Right after the shootings happen, like I said, their bodies haven't hit the ground, and this guy's tripping over them, the defendant, trying to get away. As he's running off, the driver is yelling at him, turning and yelling, "Babe, baby!" And when he doesn't reply, she doesn't hesitate. She floors it. And you'll see her car throwing sand and dirt and grass up as she flies out of there, heading southbound on 50th Street. She burns grass, and then she burns rubber on the asphalt of 50th Street, and you'll see that evidence. But she's heading southbound. These officers know that she's heading southbound, so they saturate the southern area of 50th Street going south. This area is only a couple of blocks north of I-4. They go in that area, they go south of I-4. Several hours later, in the mid-morning of Tuesday, June 29th, they locate the Toyota Camry. They locate it at an apartment complex about 3 miles south of the crime scene. They find it backed into a parking spot so that the tag won't show, the lack of a tag, in the very back of the apartment complex. And they find Miss Brantley holed up in an apartment building several hundred yards away around the corner from there, from where the car is found. This is state's M19. which is a poster-size version of a photograph you're going to see in evidence. This is the Bristol Bay apartment complex where the car is found. 50th Street is right over here. It sits right on 50th Street. Here's the entrance. The Camry is found way back here in the very back where that silver car is right there. That's not the Camry. What that is, that's a detective, a homicide detective's car. He placed it in the same spot where the Camry was found. This photo was taken about 2 days after the day that the Camry was found. This was taken from a Tampa Police Department helicopter. But this is where the Camry was found, and this is where Miss Brantley was found, several hundred yards around that corner down here. Miss Brantley is taken to the Tampa Police Department, and she's questioned by homicide detectives. You will hear in the evidence that the day after this, on June 30th of 2010, a witness named Ashley Price came down to the Tampa Police Department. She came down there of her own accord, just out of the blue, and she told them, I have information about these murders. She was interviewed by homicide detectives, and she will come in here and testify during this trial. She will tell you that she had known this defendant, Mr. Morris, for several months. She had known him, and she had had, and at least on one occasion, had been intimate with him sexually. But he would call her and talk to her frequently. And she will tell you that on the morning of June 29th, at about 3 a.m., he calls her, and he needs a ride. He's asking her for a ride. You will find from the evidence that these murders occurred at approximately 2:19 a.m., June 29th. So this is about 40 minutes later. The defendant is calling Ashley Price and asking her for a ride. She declines and says, I'm not going to help you with that. But she doesn't know anything about the murders at that point. It's not till later that morning, after the sun's come up, that she discovers the murders. When the defendant calls her again, she'll tell you. This time he tells her, have you seen the news? Turn on the news. She turns on the news, and by that point, there's news reports about the police officer's homicide. She sees the two police officers, the reports of their death. The defendant tells her, I did it. I shot him. He tells her that he was a passenger in a car that was pulled over, that there were two police officers, that they went to run his name. He was afraid he had a warrant, so he shot both those crackers in the head, is what she will tell you he told her. He told her there were two of them, they were white, which they were, and he shot them in the head, which is exactly what happened. He told her that he pulled the gun out from underneath the seat that he was sitting in, which you will see from the evidence. When Mr. Morris is feigning his surrender and giving his hand, he kind of looks to the left and dips, and then comes up with that gun in his right hand. She tells the investigating detectives, she will tell you that the defendant told her he was going to flee the state, but he might go to Jacksonville first. Now, you're going to hear from the evidence that a massive manhunt ensued after these two murders. All of these agencies, city, county, state, federal, were all involved. They brought all of their resources, all of their manpower to bear. There was a command post set up right across the street from where the murders occurred on 50th Street. They were seeking out Mr. Morris, trying to locate him. They were running down leads. Anybody called in, said they'd seen him anywhere, they'd run there. And you're going to hear that for 4 days, this defendant evaded this dragnet. For 4 days, he eluded law enforcement. This happened early Tuesday, June 29th, all day Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, until the evening of Friday, July 2nd, when this defendant was arrested. You will hear in the evidence that in their investigation, City of Tampa Police Department homicide detectives were able to acquire a phone number, a cell phone number that this defendant was using on the night of the murders and in the days before the murders. They also acquired the cell phone number of Courtney Brantley, and they obtained cell phone records for those cell phone numbers. You will see what are called cell toll records. What those records will show you is all calls being made and all calls being received. When they're made, the date, the time, the duration of the calls. And on those records, you will see the cell towers that are being utilized by the defendant's cell phone when he makes these phone calls. What you're going to see is in the minutes before the murder and the murders, and in the minutes after the murders, that this defendant's cell phone is utilizing cell phone towers all around the crime scene, to the east, to the west, to the south of the crime scene, within a short distance of the crime scene, right there, centralized right around 23rd and 50th Street, and going out into a very short distance out from there. He's utilizing cell phone towers in the minutes before the murders and the minutes after the murders. You will see in the video that when Dave Curtis intercepts this Toyota Camry, it's a red colored Toyota Camry, both his car and the Camry are heading southbound on 50th Street, coming from the north. You will see, as I said, that the murder occurred around 2:19 a.m. The traffic stop occurred around 2:12, 2:13 a.m. You will see in the phone records, and I'm going to show you again, states V, that way up 50th Street, way up above this, what's shown on this diagram, way up north of there, at about 2:03 a.m., the defendant's cell phone is hitting off of a cell tower a couple miles north of there, consistent with travel from the north to the south, and then banging off these cell towers right around the time of the murder, within minutes before and within minutes after. The detectives also obtained, through these cell phone numbers, cell phone text records, text message records. And again, these records will show you the date of the text messages, the time of the text message, and what number, and of course the toll records will show you the same thing, what number is being called and what number they're receiving phone calls from. In the text messages, you will see the number that Mr. Morris was receiving text from and where he was sending text to. And what you're going to see in the evidence is that right after the murders, first of all, you're going to see several text messages between Miss Brantley's phone and the defendant's in the day or two before this. And it's obvious from these text messages that these two were involved in a relationship. Okay, they were involved in a relationship. You'll see that from the text messages. But the texts after the murders are very compelling. What you will see in the text records from the defendant's cell phone is the following text exchange. Remembering where Miss Brantley went with that car. This text is sent at 2:30, 11 minutes after the murders, from Mr. Morris to Miss Brantley. Your ride don't need to be parked by the spot neither. Miss Brantley responds, no, still in here, but way around the corner. I need to move it somewhere else though. Way around the corner, right where it was found. The defendant texts back, just lean back till tomorrow. Your phone in your name? Miss Brantley responds back, no. The defendant then texts her at 2:33 a.m. Bet I'm about to turn my shit off till tomorrow. I love you. He's going to turn his cell phone off. She texts back at 2:34 a.m. 15 minutes after this murder, they're having this little love, these murders, they're having these little love exchange. I love you with my last breath. That's her response text. He then responds at 2:34 a.m. Yeah, just lean back. Stay loyal. Her response? Of course. Till death do us part. Then he responds at 2:36 a.m. Yeah, I'm out with love. Stay loyal, he texts her. What you're going to find in her text messages is that's exactly what she did. First, she tried to hide the Toyota Camry. Then you're going to see in her text messages that at 2:40 a.m., after her exchange with the defendant, she sends this message to 4 separate numbers at the same time. You haven't seen me. You don't know where I'm at. Please don't tell anyone anything. Erase these messages. One of the numbers she texts sends back, what? She texts back, just make like I never existed. That person then texts back, I'm just trying to make sure my baby's safe. She texts back, this is Miss Brantley, the driver of the car, your baby is home. That person texts back, wasn't talking like that, you left. Miss Brantley texts back, no, it's okay, I'm not trying to start nothing, but you don't know me anymore, please. So she stays loyal, but her loyalty, you will find from the evidence, doesn't end there. Because, as I told you earlier, when she's located, they take her to the Tampa Police Department and they interview her for almost 7 hours. She is interviewed by homicide detectives, one of which has worked for the Tampa Police Department, you will hear, for 30 years, the other for over 20 years. She is asked over and over and over, who was the passenger in your car? She's asked, the evidence will show, over 100 times she's asked that question. She never gives them a response. You will hear that after the defendant's arrest on the Friday night of June 2nd, he was booked into the Hillsborough County Jail. You're going to hear from several deputies, corrections deputies from the Hillsborough County Jail, and another officer who works for the Tampa Police Department. You're going to hear these deputies are going to tell you that they had, after the defendant's arrest, while he was in the jail, they had extensive contact with him after his arrest. That they spoke with him and they heard him speaking to others. That the defendant has a very distinctive voice, they will tell you. And all of these deputies will come in and they will tell you that they can recognize his voice because of their contact with him after his arrest in the jail. They will tell you that, and you will see the testimony, that they have listened and watched this video, this dash cam video, that they listened to the questions that Dave Curtis so thoroughly investigated and obtained. They listened to the defendant's voice, the front seat passenger. They listened to his voice when he interacted with Officer Curtis about the warrant just before he murdered Officer Curtis. And they will tell you without a doubt that that is Dontae Morris speaking. You'll hear from a detective from the Tampa Police Department who will tell you he's listened to several jail phone calls that were made by the defendant after his arrest in the jail. You'll hear that there's a jail recording system at the jail, that if people who are arrested and placed in the jail, if they want to make a call, they have to sign up for this system where they can use their numbers when they come into the jail so they can make phone calls out. But it's a very regulated system because the phone calls are recorded. All phone calls at the jail are recorded. And you're going to hear an enrollment that the defendant did after his arrest at the jail, that people who are arrested and go to the jail, they have to enroll into this system to be able to use the phone system. And they are prompted by an electronic voice to say certain phrases, multiple phrases, all different. You'll hear the defendant's voice reciting all these phrases over and over, and you will hear the distinctive nature of his voice. But you will hear from a detective from the Tampa Police Department that after enrolling, the defendant made several phone calls from the jail, and he listened to those phone calls. He also watched and listened to what are called video visitations. At the Hillsborough County Jail, you will find visitations occur by a video system, with the visitor being in one room and the person who's in the jail being in the other room, and they watch each other over a video system, kind of like Skyping, but inside the building. And they hear each other through an audio, and all that's recorded. This detective will tell you that he watched numerous visitations. And the visitations, when he was watching them, he could see the defendant's face on the one side of the screen and the visitor on the other side of the screen. And he will tell you that he also became familiar with the defendant's voice through watching these video visitations and listening to these recorded jail phone calls. And he will tell you that, without a doubt, the voice he hears from the passenger in the dash cam video is the defendant, Dontae Morris. You're going to hear from another corrections or jail deputy from the Hillsborough County Jail. He's going to tell you that after the defendant was arrested and taken to the jail, that at some point he came into contact with the defendant who was in his cell, and he was observing the defendant, and he heard the defendant and saw the defendant make this statement: "I repent for killing." In the end, there's not going to be any doubt that the man who was sitting in that passenger seat in that Camry, the man who decided, who premeditated to murder these two police officers so that he could run away, the man who decided to take the lives of these two fellow human beings so that he could escape, the man who used the element of surprise and drew these officers in close to him by feigning that he was giving up, the man who so brutally murdered these officers is this defendant sitting over here, Dontae Morris. And there's not going to be any doubt that he executed Officer David Curtis and Officer Jeff Kokab. And it's going to be crystal clear in your minds, all of your minds, at the end of this trial, that this man sitting here, Dontae R. Morris, born on 8/24/85, is a vicious, cold-blooded murderer.
John,
Does the defense wish to make an opening statement?
before we do that, may we approach?
Yes, sir. The reason I do that is we have conversations up here, and we have to talk about things that the jurors not supposed to hear, and I turn on this white noise, which you can't hear, but it doesn't cut off your headphones, so please bear with us.